So this is a question about what does desire and what you want have to do with what you know? And it seems like it doesn't have anything to do with it. In fact, it's a block to what you know. And sometimes our projections of our desires on the world block us from actually seeing what's really there. I want there to be such and such an outcome in an election, and I kind of imagine that that actually happened, or I want some person to like me, and then I project that, oh, that person likes me. So yeah, so our desires and our loves, because love is like deep desire, permanent or semi-permanent desire, is apparently it has nothing to do with knowledge. And in fact, you look at the stories, you look at Batman, or just take Batman, where when Batman loves somebody, the bad guys use that against him because it's like, oh, because you love her, I'm going to hurt her, and that way I can control you. And if you didn't love her, then I wouldn't. And like a bad guy, because they don't really love others in the same way, it's harder to manipulate them, and so forth. And so I'm trying to argue that it's the stories that let us really know more fully. It's the desires that's a big part of that, and ultimately our deepest loves that really allow us to see and know in a real way, not in a fake way, what is real. Because you can ask, and I'm not an expert on these things, but I kind of play with ideas from AI and cognitive science, and will an AI robot who doesn't have desires, who doesn't have dopamine and serotonin and these other neurotransmitters, does an AI robot see more accurately than a human because it doesn't have any desires? Perhaps some would say. Um, and and can we see real patterns in the world? Because then you say, uh, like, what is history? History is like one event and another event and another event and another event, and there's no real big pattern. And any master narrative is just a kind of fake, and it's like your wishful thinking. And I'm going to go to a couple of thinkers who I don't go to as much usually: Hegel and Marx. G.W.F. Hegel, and I'm not going to try and say his full name because it's really difficult, and Karl Marx, that's easier to say. And what I am going to focus on and what Hegel and Marx talk about are the eras or epochs of time and human history, and 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 even something, let's take a key Hegelian term, zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, or the key idea of the age. Geist is that wonderful German word that means both kind of ghost or spirit, but also intellect or consciousness. And and let's stick with consciousness because it's kind of easier to wrap our heads around. Spirit is kind of like, what does that mean anyway? In a secular sense, and yeah, let's go with consciousness and intellect. And is there a zeitgeist? Is there a spirit of our age? And you can say like, oh no, 2023 is just like 2022, and like, and 100 years ago, and like, yeah, I mean, it's just atoms after atoms moving more atoms, and ultimately, actually, it's the same atoms that existed 100 years ago or a billion years ago, and so forth. And it's just, but Hegel and Marx are good, I think, at thinking about these big turns, like I've talked about axial turn, and that there's a zeitgeist. And for example, in Hegel's own time in the early 1800s, uh, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect. He was seeing wars happen. He was seeing the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon was conquering most of Europe. Hegel was in Germany, and I don't know. I think he saw Napoleon. In any case, he saw what Napoleon was doing, and he said, "There's the zeitgeist on a horse." Like that. That guy is driving history. His personality is the zeitgeist, is the spirit of the age. Um, or yeah, what's the zeitgeist of the 2020s? I don't know. I mean, like there's various zeitgeists we could point to, like even like thinking about the AI revolution, or other types of big revolutions, or revolutions themselves. Like, are revolutions real? Like these big turning points, revolving revolutions, like the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution. Did they really change anything? Like it was just people, and okay, there was a lot of violence in the middle, and then, uh, but I would argue that with Hegel and with Marx, that these revolutions mark something very real, and and it's not something that you can measure in a beaker or in kind of chemical experiment, but we can see it in these broad patterns of history, and it's really hard to see them. It's hard to be precise, and like yeah, sometimes you can wishfully think like, oh, that's really was a turning point, but you were wrong. That really wasn't a turning point. Like, um, was the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, right? 1991. Was that like a big turning point, or was it earlier? Was it 1989? Anyone can kind of quibble with these like details, but there was a big change when communism essentially fell in Europe and Eastern Europe, and it changed. I mean, it's still kind of there in other places, but it's much different than it was when the Soviet Union was kind of promoting it and driving it um, through most of the 20th century. And there was feudalism in the Middle Ages, and there was capitalism, this revolution into capitalism and companies and corporations, and then there was a revolution um, into where we are today with kind of global capitalism. Um, and so we need to think about these things. And Hegel and Marx positing this Geist, and someone could object, and some at times I have objected when I've read a little bit of Hegel, like, come on, where are you getting this Geist business? Like you're kind of pulling it out of thin air. Like where are you pointing? Where's your evidence? Um, and again, it's not scientific evidence. It's not really measurable. You do have to kind of take a step back, as Hegel and Marx do, and really look at history and be more of a student of history and seeing patterns and developments and evolution. And what did Hegel particularly look at? He looked at the lens of liberty, human freedom and liberty, which has changed and devolved and developed and progressed and gotten better, if we can use the word better. Like, it hasn't always gotten better, but I mean, but there has been the ending of slavery and the ending of serfdom, and then more and more people could vote, and then more and more people have access to education. That's progress, and that's a real change, which we actually can measure, not scientifically, but you can definitely see it. And so that's worth paying attention to and making, statements about, and declarations like, this was a revolution, 1776, 1789, an increase of liberty, and so forth. And ancient peoples, had a ruling class that was quite small, and then this huge slave class, which was doing much of the difficult work. Or medieval Europe, as I was talking about, early modern Europe, where capitalism, nationalism were really growing. And then here we are in the 21st century, and it's kind of a late modernism, late modernity, liquid modernity, where like it's now global capitalism, not so much nationalistic, although nationalism certainly still there in its new forms. But yeah, this is a new era. These are changes. These are developments. Not always going up. I mean, like the levels of liberty and freedom and the worth placed on human lives, can go up and down in any given society. But yeah, the ages are ages. These epochs, these time periods, and we see these things, as I said, not through statistics or measurement or experiment in a chemistry lab or a physics lab, but by looking at attention and story and the way I attend to the world, the way I pay attention to certain things, not other things. I prioritize them, makes them come out to me. Liberty, like, okay, I'm focused on this concept, and that's that lens, that's that operating system that allows me to see the world as Hegel was seeing it, and seeing this development, and it's kind of a line that we can draw. And we can't even really see the world unless we have that operating system and that attentional focus. And even let take an object, this phone, and I could say, I'm looking at the object. Okay, there's the object, and it's just a human brain, eye, see object. Very simple. No, not so simple. I need a story. I need a set of values. I need I was going to say object. I need a goal, a teleology, a purpose to work towards. So then I can kind of like, I need this, and I grasp it, and I can start. It's something that I can use. I have goals. I need to contact somebody, so I can call them. I need to check my email. I can check my email. Like, there's certain things I can do with this that that allow me to see it among the various of the things in this room, and I can kind of fix on it. That's I don't know if that's the best example. Moving right along, but given that I'm seeing the world in general, whether it's an object or just the world, I'm seeing the world as tools or obstacles. So this is a tool that can get me to where I want to go. And then there's obstacles like traffic, and I've got to get around that. So like, I don't really care about each individual vehicle, or but I have I'm seeing this, and my car is my tool to attain my goal, and like the millions of pixels of information hitting my retina, and also really all parts of my body, all my senses are taking in the world at any given moment, and I'm also moving around, so seeing it from different angles. All that is driven by my purpose and desire. So getting back to the desires, and ultimately loves, like the deepest desires. The deepest desires define who you are. They're your story. They're your mythos. And we'll get to mythos in a second. And yet some people will say that these mythoi is the plural of mythos. These master narratives, these stories that we tell ourselves, these set of values, these structures of prioritization are fictions, and they are evil fictions designed by evil, powerful people to use their power to oppress the weak. I don't deny that powerful people often use these things to sometimes oppress the weak, but to see that as the actual model of all human history is absurd. Anyway, we'll get into that another time. They're not, in evil fictions, invidious fictions, an expression of will to power by some powerful person to oppress the weak. They are mythoi, structures of prioritization things that I want to attend to that allow me to work through the world, to live in the world, because I'm not just knowing the world, I'm living in the world. Part of knowing the world is living and surviving in the world as a human. And so I use the mythos that I have imbibed, the key stories, the core stories that have shaped my identity as an American, the stories of the American history or of Western history, Italian, Filipino, my family history, my local history in Houston. Like, these let me know who I am. And then my family history, like my relationships, the loves that I have, allow me to see the world and move forward in the world. And I was going to do a song. Do I have time for this? I'm going to pause for a second. So this is a song from Pink Floyd. Let's see if I can show you a little more. And if I can get the lyrics here. I knew this song well a long time ago, but it's been a little while. But it's called Wish You Were Here. Let me make sure I've got the sound quality right. Original sound for musicians on. Good. Excellent. Here goes. So, wow. So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail, a smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? Did they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, cool air, hot air for a cool breeze, cold comfort for change? Did you exchange a walk-on part in the war for a lead role in a cage? How I wish you were here. We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl, year after year, running over the same old ground. Have we found the same old fears? Wish you were here. So let's look at some of these lyrics and apply them to what we're saying here. And it's obviously a song about a lot of things, but let's look at this part. So you think you can tell. So we're trying to analyze what's on the world. We're trying to tell what's going on in the world. And did they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, hot air for a cool breeze, cold comfort for change? And did you exchange a walk-on part in the war for a lead role in a cage? And I guess my thought there is that those who say that these mythoi and these structures and patterns in the world and these eras that I'm asserting with Hegel and Marx, that these are a lead role in a cage. You're in a cage and you're painting a nice story on the wall to make you feel like it's nice and beautiful, but really you're still just in a cage. And that's one view. I think I mean, sometimes it's right. Sometimes we are doing that, but most of the time, if we're reasonable and if we're actually in dialogue with others, where we can bounce ideas off of others and get more of a full insight, especially with people we disagree with, that's where you learn the most, when you're talking to people you disagree with. Then you're pretty safe, and that you can trust that this is not a walk-on part in a war, that you're actually moving ahead. And then he says, we're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl. So we're trapped again, this kind of cage, this fishbowl. Well, we're a fishbowl. We're just like we're being observed. We're being looked at. We're like a little pet of society, of others. Like, okay, I've got to perform my role here, running over the same old ground. What have we found? The same old fears, and yeah, that is a danger where maybe there's times where this can happen to us, where we're sort of stuck. Like, I'm trying to impress others. I'm trying to play this role. I'm trying to and I'm not really aware of who I am. I'm aware of what they want me to be, but and again, that's why we need to read these great ancient stories and great modern stories, great stories in general, so we can really work through, who the hell am I, and not just listen to what other people are telling me. Here's who you are, just do this for me. Go to college, get this degree, get this job, get ahead. Wait a minute, why am I following this rat race? I need to decide who I am. And maybe it's going to involve getting a degree, but I'm going to choose that degree. So, right. And so we want to be able to tell these things. And so reading these thinkers, and I don't always, sometimes I poo-poo Marx, but Marx was brilliant. I think it's important to read, at least be familiar with his thought. You can't understand the modern world if you don't understand something about Marx. And in fact, do we have time? Let's try it. There's this scene in a movie that is called Hail Caesar, and these communists in the 1950s in the United States kidnap a Hollywood actor and explain the ideas of communism and Marxism to him. And so let's just watch this scene, and it's funny, and it's making fun of Marxism, but I think it's a useful way of thinking about how Marxism works. So here it goes.
In a causative, predictable way. History is science. This is the essence of the dialectic.
You see, if you understand economics, you can actually write down what will happen in the future with as much confidence as you write down the history of the past, because it's science. It's not make-believe.
We don't believe in Santa Claus.
Another finger sandwich.
Oh, thank you. Now, if I follow this correctly... Who's that guy?
Mr. Smitrovich takes pictures for our newsletter.
Our understanding of the true workings of history give us access to the levels of power. Your studio, for instance, is a pure instrument of capitalism. As such, it expresses the contradictions of capitalism and can be enlisted to finance its own destruction.
Which is exciting. It can be made to help the little guy, the regular Joe.
The body politic!
Shut up.
Even though its purpose is to exploit the little guy.
On the body politic.
You're for the little guy.
For the little guy against, it doesn't matter. History will be what it'll be, and we already know what it'll be, but...
So it's, okay, a bunch of little thoughts here. And so you have, I think it's Herbert Marcuse is the little guy with the pipe, who's a real Marxist thinker who was, I guess, teaching at Stanford in the 50s, so they put him in this movie, and an actor playing him who talks about how, well, this is science, this is history and science, and obviously there's a certain scientific aspect to Marx, but one of the things that I will make fun of for Marxism is that it thinks that it's science, and it would. I mean, anyway, it's wrong. It's a mythos. It's a set of ideas and values, but it imagines itself a sense. And then they're saying, like, if we understand economics and this Marxist economics, we could actually predict the future, and we know what's going to happen, and like it's already a done deal because like the structures of history follow Marx's ideas, and like there's no freedom because it's just gonna. And that's what he was saying at the end, like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That's the way history works. It's like a scientific, like a machine. Once you start it, it's just going to like crank out what's going to happen. It's like, no, wait a minute. There's human history here. There's human freedom. So that's what's wrong about it. But why am I bringing this up then? Well, for one thing, just to kind of get a sense for like what does Marxist thought look like, and where it does see these patterns, and it tends to see like there's the kind of bourgeois revolution, and then there's the proletarian revolution. Like there's these increases in levels of liberty and freedom. And I think the proletarian revolution was completely false, and we saw that in the Soviet Union it didn't work. But they were trying to stand up for the little guy. And then they're looking, okay, you're here in this American capitalism with the Hollywood and on this this big capitalist apparatus which is oppressing the people and keeping them down, and so we smart Marxists are going to come in here to Hollywood and use capitalism's own tools to tear down capitalism. And anyway, I don't think it's going to work, and it didn't work. And that's what I wanted to say. So to wrap it up, because I need to go here. We have these mythoi, we have a mythos, and the key is not to kind of like see it as a scientific thing, like we've nailed it down, this is exactly it, we've figured it out, like, but no, we need to keep reading myths and mythology as in mythoi, like great works, stories, ancient stories, modern stories, get these stories in dialogue with each other in our own brain and with ourselves among each other in conversation with others, so that we can really work among these mythoi and not become kind of captive to them, or to be fooled by them, like Marxists can say, like sometimes they do fool us and make us enslaved to a master narrative that's not real. And so we need to study. We need to read long books. And we need to talk about them with others. This is, I would argue, the hope of our society and of all world societies. Get back to reading long books and talking about them in conversation with others, including with people I strongly disagree with, and bouncing ideas off of them, testing out our ideas, learning from people with different perspectives. This is the way forward. So there we go.